All right, good evening. I've got 6 p.m. on the nose, so I'm going to go ahead and get started and try to be respectful of all of our time. Mrs. Beek will be able to monitor the waiting room and get people in as they continue to join us. So let me, while we're getting those last few people in, let me go ahead and share my screen, and then we'll talk through some of these logistics. All right, is that good? Can you guys see that slideshow?
Yeah.
Good. All right, so good evening, and to those of you observing Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah. This is gonna be an unusual presentation, but it's 2020, so pretty much everything is unusual these days. But we will answer the questions about the transition to GBN as best we can. And we have more information that comes in by the day, and we kind of pushed this back as far as we could, but there's still some unanswered questions, but we have enough information that I think that at least we can go through the overview of the procedure. Before we jump in, I did want to say that we do have the chat enabled for questions. There will be, should take us about a half an hour, maybe a little more to go through the slides, and then we'll do a question and answer at the end. However, as we're going, if instead of jotting a question down, you wanted to put something in the chat, you have a couple options. If you click on the chat icon, I think most of us are Zoom familiar now, but just to go through it, there's a chat icon at the bottom of the screen. If you kind of hover over the bottom of the Zoom window, you click on that, it'll open the chat window. And then at the bottom, you can select who your message goes to. So the default is usually everyone. So if you type a message in your chat and hit enter, that message will go out to the entire room. And many of our questions probably are good for the entire room, because I think a lot of us have the same question. So feel free to use that. We'll do introductions here in a second, but if you have a special education question that you think might just pertain to your family, then you can click on the drop down next to everyone and select Julie Ravello's name and private message her so she can answer that question either in a private chat, or if some of these questions are a little bit more detailed, we might have to email you tomorrow, but we'll keep a record of all this so that we can get those answers to you. Or like I said, you can just wait till the end and we can have a verbal Q&A once the presentation is over. So I think that's it for the logistics. So let's jump in. All right, so as I mentioned, the presenters, there's 3 of us this evening. My name is Rob McElligott. It's my privilege to be the principal here at Wood Oaks Junior High. I'm joined by Carrie Beek.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Carrie Beek.
And Julie Ravello.
Hi, everyone. Julie Ravello. And Rob, the slideshow's not showing up on mine.
Can everybody else just give me a thumbs up? Can you guys see that? Or is nobody? Oh, they can't.
It was
All
there
right.
and then it disappeared.
It might have disappeared when I went to present mode. So let's see. Let's try it now. Can you guys see that now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we'll start the with a quick overview of the entire articulation process. The first part, I know you received communication from Glenbrook North on the PSAT. So that is usually kind of the kickoff of this entire process. We talked to the high school and the superintendent level. They had a lot of conversations about administering that test, and it just proved to be a little too complex in a pandemic to do that safely. And we know that there would be some that weren't comfortable taking that test, and if the data isn't at least mostly complete, it's of less use to us. So we'll talk a little bit more about how that impacts this articulation process and what we're going to do to try to replace that information. But that's past. So, oh, I don't know what happened there. So as we articulate with the high school, the sharing of information between the teachers at Glenbrook North and the teachers at Wood Oaks is started this week and will continue into the first week after winter break. So the department heads, and one of the first GBN vocabulary words, if this is your first child going through Glenbrook North, they call their department heads instructional specialists. So you'll hear the term IS quite a bit for instructional specialist. So the instructional specialist from each content area comes over to Wood Oaks, to all the feeder schools, and meets with each department. So the 8th grade social studies teachers all sit down and meet with the social studies instructional specialist, and they go through student at a time and talk about the student strengths and the areas that they could use for improvement. How are their grades? How's their test taking? And we will look at whatever testing data we do have, because we still have some, even going back to 7th grade, that we can use if the instructional specialist wants a little bit more guidance from the standardized testing. And that's when they start to make those placements for what the student will be taking in high school. In parallel to some degree, but then continuing through January and into February, if your student has an individualized education plan, there will be an articulation meeting with your student and you, their case manager, Ms. DeVito, and Mrs. Ravello is there. Sometimes I'm there. And that articulation happens at the table, and we talk about how the IEP, and Ms. Ravello will talk about this in detail, but how that translates over to GBN, and courses are discussed often at that table. So those are happening. We'll talk about the exact timing, but at some point you will receive an email from Glenbrook North that talks about where your child placed. They have a lot of levels. We'll go into those in detail in a little bit. But which level classes your child is going to be placed in for their freshman year. And then there's a process for you to get feedback from GBN, and to, if you aren't in agreement with those placements, there's a process for you as well. Then it comes time to actually register. Now, in the past, we had a day-long field trip over to Glenbrook North, and we would send a couple busloads of kids throughout the day. They would head over to Glenbrook North. They would have their ID picture taken. They would take a tour of the school, and they would actually register for their classes. So they would sit down with the counselor, and actually that's when the formal registration takes place. So not just the classes that they were recommended for, but then their electives and what classes they want to take for that. So that we'll go into that process here in a few slides as well. But this year, we are not heading over to Glenbrook North for fairly obvious reasons. So we will be arranging Zoom meetings coming up in January for the students to meet with their counselor virtually. So there won't be any ID pictures at that time, there won't be a tour, but that is where the registration will take place. And we have times and dates, and that's about it for those meetings right now, or not even times, because they'll be different by student, but dates. And more information will be coming from Glenbrook North about exactly what those meetings will look like. So that's one of those that we don't have quite all the details yet. And then at the end of the meeting, we'll go through the timeline. You probably saw the recording button pop up when you were joining the meeting. So I am recording this. So if you missed some information, tomorrow I'll have this up on the website. You can rewatch as much of it as you would like. I will also just put the slideshow itself so you can access all of these slides without having to listen to me talk. And tomorrow you will get an email with a PDF that has two very important things on it. One is the timeline that we're going to go through tonight, and the other is the contact information of the instructional specialists and the assistant principal at Glenbrook North. So all of that will be available on the website tomorrow, and that PDF will get emailed to you directly. So everybody will get it directly, but then it will live on the website as we go through this process, so you can get to it at that time too. All right, Wood Oaks input.
So what this process looks like in the beginning of it is the very first step begins with your sons and daughters' teachers. And they have discussions with each other. They have discussions with the instructional supervisors at Glenbrook North, and they give input to GBN. And that input includes all of the things that you can see. It starts with the grades that they're getting in their classes. It starts also with what the teachers know about your sons and daughters. Now, granted, we are living in a different world, and it's a little bit different getting to know your children, but the teachers do have a good handle on how your students are working independently within the class, whether it's been in hybrid or the remote setting. How well are they advocating for themselves and asking questions and seeking that assistance? And then how are they contributing to the class? And while it's different with being hybrid and being remote, we still get a good sense of how they contribute and participate in class. Your sons and daughters have been part of Socratic seminars, whether in ELA classes or social studies classes. They've been working in breakout rooms in Zoom while they've been fully remote or while they're hybrid. So they've had many opportunities to demonstrate those advocacy and class contribution skills. And then also how are their problem solving or critical thinking skills? And our teachers are getting a good gauge of that based on the work that they're submitting, how they're analyzing the literature that they're reading in class. So the teachers give all that input. And Dr. McGilligan, next slide. And they have articulation meetings with the instructional assistants. And those have already happened, I think, for almost every department so far. And they go student by student and they talk individually about each student. The instructional assistant at Glenbrook North brings their knowledge of all the courses that are offered at Glenbrook North. And while Wood Oaks is a small school and we don't have, the depth of courses that we can offer like Glenbrook North, the instructional assistants from GBN understand their content areas very well, and they understand all the various levels and options. And they talk to our teachers and give them that information. And then collectively, they talk about what would be the best placement for that child. And that decision on the placement ultimately is made by GBN, while our teachers do give information about how they're working and what they're seeing in class currently. Glenbrook North does know their system and what they have seen time and time again over the years of success at their level. So they do make that ultimate decision of where the students are placed. And Mrs. Ravello will go over the process for our special ed students.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Beek. As Dr. McGilligan said, we do have separate meetings for students who have IEPs and students who have 504 plans. We are currently in the process of scheduling those meetings. Many of you may have already received a phone call from Karen Johnson in the special education office. We are given dates by Glenbrook North, and we call you and certainly try to stick to the dates that they have given us. And those are typically scheduled in January, February, and sometimes March. And then the 504 meetings are scheduled after that time. So we currently are working on scheduling the IEP meetings. And then once those are all scheduled, Karen Johnson will be reaching out to parents of students with 504 plans to schedule those meetings. Those meetings take about an hour, typically in a typical year. The 8th grade team who's working with that student will go over to Glenbrook North with the parents and the student and meet with some representatives from Glenbrook North Special Education Department. This year, like everything else, those meetings are going to be via Zoom. The parents will be given an invitation to the meeting, and also your child will be expected to attend the meeting as well. And the case manager, whether that case manager is Ms. Sharaga, Mrs. Smolin working with speech and language, Mr. Bolts working in social work, is working right now with your child on prepping for that meeting. And the reason that we prep for the meeting is because the Glenbrook North staff will be talking to the student about perhaps, what challenges they experience in school. Can they identify what their disability is? They'll be talking about their plans post high school. And so there is some prep work for that as well. If we could go to the next slide. It's really important that the parents and students attend the meeting. We have had situations in the past where perhaps there's some more sensitive information and students might join the meeting after a while or exit the meeting halfway through. And we can arrange that individually. If you would like to contact me and talk about that as an option, we can certainly do that. Ahead of the meeting, and many of you should have already received this, there's a transition questionnaire that parents are asked to complete. And that's really talking about, where do you see your child 5 years down the road? What are their interests? Do you think that they want to go to college? Just some questions to prep the team to better understand your child as a learner and what their expectations are. Your student will also complete a transition questionnaire working with their case manager, so they will do that at school. And Glenbrook North also asks each student to write a very short autobiography just to talk about themselves. And that also will be done at school, and all that paperwork is then submitted to the appropriate staff at Glenbrook North. One more slide. And then just to talk a little bit about what happens at the actual articulation meeting. It really starts obviously with introductions, but then it moves into talking about the students' plans post-high school. And that's the transition portion of the meeting. It's just really talking about what kinds of courses students might want to take, what are their interests, what do they plan to do when they graduate, etc. We also then review how the student is doing in school. We look at their academic performance. We also look at any kind of organizational challenges they have, homework completion, independence, and things like that, and we share that information. We'll go over the students' goals, and the high school will write new goals based on the information that we have shared. And then we will also talk about any accommodations that the students are receiving. And at the high school, they actually have two different sections that they talk about on a student's IEP. They have accommodations, and they also have instructional strategies. And the staff will talk about a particular accommodation a student is currently receiving, and will share how that accommodation might be implemented at the high school. We will then talk about any recommended special education supports and services. And one thing to be aware of is typically those services are going to mirror what's going on at Wood Oaks. So if your child is in a resource class, we will likely be recommending a resource class at the high school. If your child is in a smaller, more self-contained academic course, we would be looking at a smaller, more self-contained academic course at the high school, or perhaps a placement in one of the team academic programs. If a student has social work services and that they're recommending social work services continue, that will be part of the conversation as well, along with speech and language. And then the high school will write the student's new IEP at that meeting that will be ready to start in the fall of 2021. I think is that all of my slides? Yeah, okay.
So I mentioned in the beginning that there will be a point where you receive an email from Glenbrook North. That date is January 15th. And it will probably come in the afternoon. Now, with the adjustment to the school calendar, January 15th is now a non-student attendance day. But generally, that day is a student attendance day, and we've asked GBN to wait until the afternoon to send that, so school's not in session when the students are getting these placements. It doesn't quite matter as much anymore, but so I would still expect them to be sending them around 4 p.m. So they will be mailed home. Keep in mind that this is not a schedule. It won't have any order. I mean, they'll be listed in some order, but it has nothing to do with when the class is taken. So it's not like the first one listed as a morning class. So that is still part of the scheduling process. But it will tell you which levels, and I'll go into what that means here in a second. Glenbrook North and Glenbrook South, for that matter, has modified their approach to the appeals process over the past few years. And in that email that you get from them with the course placements, there will be a detailed process for if your child was placed in regular and you feel they should have been in an honors class, or if they were placed in honors and you're thinking, well, maybe that's a little too much for them, that you would want them in a regular class. There's a process for how you can let GBN know that you think there's going to be, there needs to be a change for whatever reason, and there'll be a whole process with that. So what happens is that is coordinated by the instructional specialist, which is why those phone numbers will be emailed out tomorrow, and it'll be posted on the website, is because that's the person you'll contact. Eric Etherton is the assistant principal. He oversees this entire process, but if you have questions about any curricular area, it does go to the instructional specialist. If your child is placed in a regular level course and you want honors, or maybe they're in a G level course and you were hoping that they would be in regular, there will most likely be a test that's given to the child to demonstrate where their understanding is. It's just a collection of more information. It's not a test where they need like an 80% or it's not going to go up. It's just more information to put into this conversation. Again, what exactly that looks like this year with the pandemic, I'm not entirely sure, but I know their plan is to try to find a way to administer those tests one way or another. So that will likely be a piece of it. There'll be a deadline. It'll be listed in that email you get with the course placements that you have to have that challenge put in by. And then, as Mrs. Beek said, once that email goes home on the 15th, the contacts are at the high school. At that point, nobody at Wood Oaks, whether it's the English teacher, the Reading LA teacher, or even me, we don't have a say there. That conversation has to happen with the high school. So this is a modification of this presentation that we added a couple of years ago because it came to our attention, and rightfully so. It makes sense that especially if this is your first child to go through Glenbrook, you don't know what all these numbers mean, all these letters mean, and your schedule comes with all these things on it. So I'm just going to quickly kind of go through. So when you do get that email and it says that they're in a team class or an honors class, kind of what does that mean? And we'll start with the academy. This process has already started. GBN and GBS combine forces and have a cohort of students each year that enter the GBN Academy. It's generally 30 students. They take 15 from GBN and 15 from GBS. And those students stay together for the entire 4 years. They do not have a say in what language they take. And actually, I think this French is wrong. I believe it's German. So don't quote me on that, but I'll get that updated. Carrie's nodding her head. So I do believe it's German this year. But the entire academy cohort takes the same language because it's all integrated into their classes. They've already had their informational Zoom meeting for that. And I heard our students talking about it. So they actually heard about it before I did. And so they've had that. I can tell you that the application process is posted on their website right now. So if you go to Glenbrook North and just look for academy, you can either search it or go to departments and it's listed there. And there's a detailed process for what your child would have to do if they want to try to get into the academy. The deadline for that application is the 25th. Then there's an interview process. It's a pretty extensive process. It's not for everybody, but it can be a rewarding experience at GBN. Okay, so honors classes are just what we remember them being when we were in high school. They are taught at an accelerated pace, not just faster, but deeper. They generally tend to get students more AP credits. So depending on the content area, even staying in a regular track leads you to AP in different curricular areas. But the honors track will get them there faster. It will get them the opportunity possibly for more AP classes, which most of us know translates into college credits and can end up saving us some money in the long run. So that's kind of where the students get enthused, and certainly the parents want to be supportive of that. The other big thing is it bumps their grade point average 1 point. So if they get an A, that counts as a 5.0 towards their grade point average. So as they're looking towards college, that is a benefit, obviously, to get that inflated. There's a lot of discussion, and I've heard the counselors talk to the students that this is obviously a lot more work and there's going to be more homework. The tests are going to be intensive. So the question comes, is it better to just take a regular class and get an A, or to fight through an honors class and get a B and they count the same? And where's that? I would also caution parents to talk to the students, and the GBN will talk to the students about this as well, which is think hard about how many honors courses they're taking, especially that freshman year. It is a big transition in a normal year, and coming out of a pandemic, hopefully coming out of a pandemic, it's gonna be a lot. So it's certainly a family decision, and but something worth talking about, the number of honors classes, because it is a tremendous amount of work. So sometimes it is, and a lot of times they can jump right back into the sophomore year after they get their feet under them. So that's honors. Then you'll see that most classes carry a 163 designation. That is the code. So it'll be like English 163, History of World Civ 163. That's their code for freshman level classes. I skipped over it, but for the honors classes, it actually shows up as 173. That's how you know that it's an honors designation. So most of the classes have that 163, and if the word honors doesn't show up, or there's no letters G, GT, GTA, that is the standard level of algebra or whatever course it is that they're registering for. It's a general education class. It's the class that most of the students end up taking as they go through, and that is just it's high school. Now there's a couple classes that have built-in supports to help students be successful, quite similar to what many of our students are living with here at Wood Oaks on a daily basis. So first is G and Team, which is next. These are both general education courses. This is not special education. Special education will be discussed at the articulation meetings Julie was talking about, but a lot of special education classes or students do take G level classes. They take regular classes. We have students in honors classes, so it doesn't really translate. G is a designation that's only used in the math department and the world language department. So if your student had some struggles here when they were taking Spanish and the teacher thinks that they might be able to use a little bit slower pace, a lot of times there's a dedicated second adult in the class that can help them. That's what that G designation means. It is the same curriculum. It ends in the same place. They have modified certain things that are in the 163 course to make it fit. They're also generally smaller class sizes. You know, on average, our students are in class. I mean, who knows what size classes are now, whether they're virtual or hybrid, but normally our class size is right around 20, some a little bigger, some a little smaller. GBN tends to be more in the 27, 28 range for their normal classes, some a little smaller. So the smaller class size in a G level class can be very helpful. And then there are courses which kind of have the nickname of Team. You'll hear that's what the kids refer to it as, and parents that have had older children go through. Those letters, instead of being G, are generally GT or GTA. I don't know why they can't agree to just pick one of them, but depending on the content area, some of them call it GT and some of them call it GTA. This is still a general education class. This is a much slower paced class. Every class that has a team designation is co-taught. And then the big ones are English and history are taught together. They're kind of almost like a humanities course. They're mixed together and they're taught by the same two teachers, an English teacher and a history teacher. And then there's usually another support class. The other thing that can be a big selling point, especially if your child does not have math as a strong suit, is algebra meets every day. And there is Team is the algebra course. That's the course that's there for math, but it does meet every day. Hopefully, maybe not. GBN operates on a block schedule. So you go to half your classes one day, half the classes the next day, and then it repeats. So there are pros and cons to that when it comes to workload and homework. But when it's something like math and world language to a different degree, that daily repetition is very helpful. And students are used to that here at Wood Oaks. And if they're not in a team level course, they will be doing math every other day. And that can create a headache for some students. So the other thing that GBN wants to make sure that people understand is Team is not a program like the academy. Like you're in the academy for 4 years, that's your academy. Team is reevaluated every year, and it doesn't mean they're in Team for everything. They can be in Team for one course, and it does get reevaluated. So those are the different course designations.
So on January 26th, this is a major date because that's when your children will officially be registering with Glenbrook North. And on that date, they're going to be meeting with their counselors throughout the day via Zoom. If your student, and that is, Dr. McGalligan, I recall it's a B day or an A day, I can't remember. It's a B. So if your student is in person on that day, during their school day at Wood Oaks, we're gonna have a location for them to go to where they can have these private Zooms with their counselors. They're gonna review the courses that were emailed home in that recommendation list. And the students are going to go through what their elective choices are and what their overall program is going to be. Between now and January 26th, there's going to be an open curriculum night. There's going to be some other meetings on January 4th. The GBN counselors are going to meet with all of our Wood Oaks students in one big group and kind of give an overview. But right now, what you can do is by going to the Glenbrook North website, you can look at that course catalog and start looking at some of those elective choices that they have and start talking with your sons and daughters about what their interests are and what they see themselves doing at Glenbrook North for those electives. because on January 26th, when they do meet with their counselors, that's the time when they're going to be making those selections for their electives. If your student is remote on that day because it's a B day and they're at home, they're still going to have those Zoom links, and they're going to be able to do that now from at least the privacy of their home. So whether the student's in person or at home, we're going to be making sure that they have the time that they need, and that's going to be scattered throughout the day. So we do recognize, and the teachers recognize, that this is a day when students are going to be in and out of classes, and our 8th grade teachers make all the accommodations to meet the needs of the students on that day. Dr. McElligott? So before we get to questions, we will be posting the different dates that are going to be coming up. And again, let me just review some of them. And we're going to have these posted on our website, and Dr. McElligott will be sharing that out in an email. But January 4th, again, is when the students will be meeting virtually with the Glenbrook North counselors. And again, that one will be just one group meeting with them. January 26th is when the counselors will be meeting one-to-one with students and registering. The academy deadline for if your son or daughter was going to be applying for academy, that's the day before, on January 25th. In February, you will be getting your Dr. McElligott, I cannot remember the date in February that we do not know. Ah, thank you for that. The appeals testing. The appeals testing will be occurring sometime in February. So if you get that final course recommendation, which will be emailed home on the 15th, and some of those courses you feel like your son or daughter was placed either too high or too low, that appeals process happens within the, from January 29th is the deadline. Usually around that time, we don't have the exact deadline yet from GBN, but right around that end of January time is when you would submit an application to that specific department to request your son or daughter to be moved up a level, or in some cases, you can even request to be moved down a level. Glenbrook North instructional assistants will, or instructional supervisors will be setting up days and times in February when that testing would be happening. So if your student is placed in a regular level course, but you feel like an honors level course would be a better placement, your son or daughter would then take an appeals test with Glenbrook North. And again, that would be sometime in February. You can see the freshman activity night and also the freshman curriculum nights. Those dates are in there. And then Dr. Ravello or Mrs. Ravello talked about the articulation process for our IEP and 504 students, and those articulation meetings happen in that January to May timeframe. And then the biggest date, the one that we look forward to a lot because it's a celebration for all of us, is June 1st, when we get to celebrate your sons and daughters and all of their achievements at District 27. And that is the date right now for graduation, and all the details of what graduation will look like will be coming in the near future. And I think we're ready for questions now.
We do anticipate that that it will be similar to we did with last year's graduating class, some sort of a drive-up graduation ceremony. We're don't know that we're going to be able to have that many people together by June. So we are moving forward with that plan, which I know we actually had 8th grade parents last year that felt we should do that from now on. And I don't know that I support that idea, but it was a fun experience, and we can make it as fun as we can for the students. So yeah, so mark that date, June 1st. That's a pretty firm date at this point. And then finally, just some tips and tricks as we, especially again, if this is your oldest child and the first trip through the high school, we're getting to the winter break, and so it's the second half of the school year. Shortly after we come back, just encourage your children to finish the year strong. That we hear it every year that once the email comes home saying what classes they're in, that they don't even have to try anymore, that it doesn't matter. Yes, they do, and GBN does keep in touch with the teachers and students that maybe are trying to coast the rest of the year are discussed. So please encourage your children to finish the year strong. This one takes on a whole new meaning. This is the same bullet that we've used for past years, but model and assist students with developing healthy coping strategies and to deal with stress and challenging situations. Yes, for the past 9 months, we've all been living with that. So continue to support your children as you have through this entire process. And then the big one, and it's to a smaller degree in junior high, although when you talk to 4th and 5th grade parents, they think that it's this huge transition with the social life in the junior high. Well, it's just going to continue to exponentially grow when they get to the high school. And the temptations of social over academic are going to be there all the time. And it is important to have that social life. It's important to do athletics and clubs, but they're going to need help finding that guidance. And your children will push back, and they will think that they have all the answers, but talk to them, hear them out, and help them find that balance between the importance of the academics and having a balanced lifestyle. Staying informed, Mrs. Beek mentioned, please mark those dates as firm on your calendar for both the curriculum night and the activities night, because that is going to be very informative, especially for those of you that this is your oldest child, but even ones that have had multiple children go through, there's always something different. And certainly this year it will look different, and they'll have extra questions to answer. And then the last thing I put down there was just listen. That's the most important thing you can do with your child is make sure they know that you're listening to them and can problem solve with them. So with that, we do have ample time for questions. At this point, there's not a lot in the chat, but you can certainly go there. If you just want to raise your hand and ask a question, if you go to the participants tab there at the bottom, there's a way to raise your virtual hand so we can see it, and we can call on you that way. Although some of your names I'm not going to recognize, but we'll identify it as best we can. And as I said, if we don't have an answer right now, we'll certainly get you one in the next day or two. So questions? Anybody gonna be brave enough to be the first one to step up? I guess we were thorough. We'll stall here in case somebody's got a question percolating, but obviously this is not your last chance to ask any of these questions. All three of us are always available via email. If you get a chance to re-watch this video over the next few days and questions come up, or you talk to your children about it and questions come up, we're certainly always available to ask questions. Good question about curriculum night. Yes, both of those events, curriculum night and the activities night, are for parent and students. They will be informative for both of you. And you will most likely get a nice flyer of information from GBN with details about exactly how that's going to look. Because again, usually everybody shows up at GBN and there's a presentation to kick it off. And this year it will be virtual. So I'm sure that there will be some information for exactly how that's going to look. Okay, well, again, I don't want to keep us. I know it's 6:30, but it looks like it's 10 o'clock outside. But can you include the link to the classes at GBN? And I'll tell you what I can do, Mr. Levin, is the PDF, I don't think I'm going to get on that. But what I'll do is tomorrow when I send out the email, I will send a link to the course catalog. It is really easy to find on the GBN website, but I will put a link on the email that I send out that has the PDF with both the calendar and the contact information. Mrs. Gerstein, the number of electives, there'll be information about that when you get the course placements, how that blocks out. And it depends because world language takes up one of those spots. That's kind of considered an elective for them. But that will be in the email from GBN. Anything students need to collect and send to GBN? No, there's no, it's not like an application process. So there's nothing, everything that GBN needs on your children will come from us, and we will provide that. So you do not need to gather anything. Yes, clubs and activities, that will all be there on activity night day, the GBN. Again, how that's exactly presented will be different this year, but the list will definitely be presented through GBN. A couple questions on elective process overall. Again, I don't want to speak to that. I will let that come from GBN. I know depending on how many courses they take, how many academic courses, it'll limit how many. I also know that they can very easily do both an instrumental music and a choral music, but it depends on, if what they have that they're trying to fit in. Usually if they're going to do instrumental and choral, there's generally not room for a language, which is fine. This is a piece of trivia that not many know, which is there is no language requirement to graduate from Glenbrook North High School. You could go through all 4 years and never take a language and still meet all of the graduation requirements. That being said, most students take languages because that's what colleges want to see is at least 2 years. Some of your bigger schools want 3 years. It is rare that schools want 4, but I know some students will take 4, but it's generally 2 or 3 years is all they will need. Some students still take 4, I'm well aware, but it just depends on what electives they want to fit into their schedule. The amount of classes, again, that will be something that is in that email when you get the course levels that GBN will explain so that your student knows, for years we've done this. I've never lived through it in this district, so I can't give firsthand experience, but we've never had feedback that students felt, at least I've never taken it, that they felt unprepared for those registration meetings. So it is pretty well spelled out what they need to do, what they need to decide. That meeting is also not the drop dead date. I know many students will change their elective during the registration process, even into the spring. Now, obviously they face the chance that maybe their course is full and they can't at that point. So it's better to make that decision up for that registration meeting, but it is not a drop dead date when it comes to whether it's a course level or an elective. They do have some time there, but best to have a good plan ahead of time so that you don't have to worry about classes filling up. The question about GBN and what modes they're going through, no, I have no inside information on that. So I would have to say to direct that one to the high school for their timeline on and how they're going to do instruction. Taking language outside of GBN, I know it's difficult to take any class, whether it's a language. I know math comes up a lot, that students want to dual enroll. That is a great question for the instructional specialist. So tomorrow when you get the email with all the instructional specialists' names and contact information, Josh Morrell is the world language instructional specialist. So I would say that would be a question for him as far as, can my child take a language outside of class and get credit? I know the answer for that is normally no, but I'm not going to speak for the high school, but it's generally not something that's set up. And Mrs. Ortega, that was another question for Josh Morrell to email him as far as what they will give credit for at GBN and what they won't. That is totally a question for Josh Morrell, and I'm sure he'll be able to help you with that. Oh, and somebody threw in the chat, good information for everybody. So somebody at GBN is currently taking a language and an instrument and singing. So perfect feedback. All right, I think we've covered those. There's a couple questions about instrumental music. Both Mr. LaGrasso and Mr. Gordon will be in touch with the students and parents about that transition. I know that they take it, they're very passionate about students continuing into high school and not giving up the instruments that they've invested time in. So yes, I would look to expect as we get back from winter break and we start looking at this process a little more intently, that both Mr. LaGrasso and Mr. Gordon will reach out about that process to the high school and how to continue, because there are a lot of options about, it's not just one band and one orchestra anymore. There's ensembles and there's a lot of options to them. Usually we have an assembly concert where the band, the orchestra, and the choir and a few choice ensembles perform for all of our students. And they use that to help frame for the 8th graders what all is available to them. And sadly, that is not going to be able to happen this year. So this information will have to be articulated a little bit less fun way, because that's always a fun concert, especially to see the Wildcat alums come back and perform for us. Will there be a virtual tour of GBN? I have no idea. I have no idea. They may be working on, I know that we last spring tried to find ways to recreate that articulation process for students. I can only imagine that GBN is working on something for that, but I don't know. That would be an Eric Etherton question, because that's more of a general question. So if they're working on that, I'm not aware, so. Okay. Well, again, please feel free to reach out to any of the 3 of us with your questions, depending on if they're special education related. Ms. Ravello would be happy to answer it. Anything else, Carrie or I will be happy to help. And we are available. And GBN will be coming out with more information on this whole process to share with you as well. So you will be informed, and we will do what we can to keep it as traditional as we are able, but we'll keep creating. So I hope everybody has a wonderful night. Thank you again. Happy Hanukkah to those of you that are going to go light candles, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good evening.
Good night.